Almost all American journalism is controlled by a few massive corporations. News Voice is a one-of-a-kind mobile app that tracks the bias and corporate interests that infuse the news stories we consume every day, and it's completely free to use. Go to newsvoice.com/Pakman to download it. So yesterday was Michael Bloomberg's first debate as a Democratic presidential candidate. He finally got the polling support that he needed in order to get into a debate, now that, of course, the DNC has eliminated that individual donor requirement as a prerequisite for getting into the debates. And Michael Bloomberg was eaten alive. I mean, just absolutely annihilated in what could be a campaign-ending debate. I don't know. It might not be, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Depends on how many people watched the debate. It depends how many people are sort of staking their support on Michael Bloomberg based on something like debate performance rather than for other reasons. We'll get to that. We were wondering, will it be the centrists attacking Bloomberg because he is more of a direct threat to them? Would it be the progressives, Bernie and Warren, trying to take advantage of having a turbo billionaire on the stage to talk about how radically different their policies are? And the answer was yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to all of the above. Everybody attacked Bloomberg, centrists in one way, the progressives in another way. And I'm going to show you some of those moments. Now, before we do this, if you had pulled me aside yesterday, 5 minutes before the debate, and said to me, David, if you had to guess, do you think Elizabeth Warren will mention horse-faced lesbians in the first 20 seconds of the debate, later in the debate, or not at all? I probably would have said, I don't expect Elizabeth Warren to mention horse-faced lesbians. And I would have been wrong. Within the first 20 seconds, at her first opportunity to talk, Elizabeth Warren going right in on Michael Bloomberg with alleged comments that he's made about women. Take a look.
For another 4 years, and we can't stand that.
So I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats are not going to win.
Just immediately setting the tone for what was going to be a night of slamming Michael Bloomberg without Bloomberg defending himself particularly well. And he was taking hits left and right. It was nonstop. The worst moment for Bloomberg was when Elizabeth Warren started pressing him about non-disclosure agreements with former employees related to sexual harassment, most of which we believe, I mean, we don't know because they're NDA'd, but we believe most of it was between other employees. In other words, it was at Bloomberg's company, but didn't involve Bloomberg, although eventually Bloomberg talks about, jokes I told that people may not have liked. And Bloomberg was not well prepared for this, really, really brutal. And again, Elizabeth Warren just really destroying him.
Senator Warren, you've been critical of Mayor Bloomberg on this issue.
Yes, I have. And I hope you heard what his defense was. I've been nice to some women. That just doesn't cut it. The mayor has to stand on his record, and what we need to know is exactly what's lurking out there. He has gotten some number of women, dozens, who knows, to sign non-disclosure agreements, both for sexual harassment and for gender discrimination in the workplace. So, Mr. Mayor, are you willing to release all of those women from those non-disclosure agreements so we can hear their side of the story?
We have a very few non-disclosure agreements.
How many is that?
Let me finish.
How many is that?
None of them accuse me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told. And let me put.
So this is already terrible. I did nothing other than maybe somebody didn't like a joke I told. That's terrible. I couldn't think of a worse way to try to explain what happened. Typically, jokes don't lead to payoffs and non-disclosure agreements. It's already bad for Michael Bloomberg, but let's continue.
Maybe they didn't like the joke I told. And let me put, there's agreements between two parties that wanted to keep it quiet, and that's up to them. They signed those agreements, and we'll live with it.
So wait, when you say it is up to, I just want to be clear. Some is how many? And when you say they signed them, and they wanted them, if they wish now to speak out and tell their side of the story about what it is they allege, that's now okay with you? You're releasing them on television tonight?
Senator? No.
Is that right?
Senator,
Tonight?
Senator, the company and somebody else, in this case, a man or a woman, or could be more than that, they decided when they made an agreement that they wanted to keep it quiet for everybody's interest. They signed the agreements, and that's what we're going to live with.
I'm sorry. No, the question is, are the women bound by being muzzled by you? And you could release them from that immediately, because understand, this is not just a question of the mayor's character.
So just taking shot after shot. And what we learned yesterday was that Michael Bloomberg did not make his billions winning any debates. That's for very sure. A very good analysis of what happened by brand new CNN political commentator Andrew Yang about Bloomberg's failure. Here is Andrew Yang's take on it.
Yang, you know the field the best. You know what it's like on that stage. What was the read?
I think three things happened to Mike tonight. Number one, he just found out he'd make the debate yesterday. There were two times when I wasn't sure if I was going to make the debate, and my team got me together to prepare. And you're really not sure if you're preparing because you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be in this debate. So Mike, even though he was, I'm sure, getting coached and prepared, he was like, I don't know if I'm going to be in this debate. And so I don't think he was coached hard enough. Number two, he was clearly instructed to keep his cool no matter what. But that ended up presenting as being lethargic and uninterested for a big chunk of the debate. And the third most telling thing is that if I'm his team, you know he's going to get a stop and frisk question, like a gender discrimination or mistreatment question. So you coach him and you have him give you 60, 75-second answers over and over again until he can do it in his sleep. And the fact that he did not have those answers at his fingertips lets me know categorically he was not properly prepared for this debate.
Now, I could go on with the Bloomberg stuff, but it's all this bad. Before we move on, if you want to say what good moments did Bloomberg have, I think his best moments were at one point there was a debate about whether it should be mandatory that employees be given 20% ownership of the companies where they work. And Bloomberg said, guys, this isn't going to happen, and it helps Trump that we're even talking about this. And I tend to agree with him there. We want to democratize the workplace. There are countless ways to do it. Worker representation on boards, tying, the multiple of the CEO wage to, there's all these different things we can do. A law that mandates 20% ownership is turned over to employees. It's just not happening anytime soon. And making it a subject of debate pushes people away from any Democrat, I believe. And here is Michael Bloomberg making that point.
So they can have some say over what happens to their lives.
Mayor Bloomberg, you own a large company. Would you support what Senator Sanders is proposing?
Absolutely not. I can't think of ways that would make it easier for Donald Trump to get reelected than listening to this conversation. It's ridiculous. We're not going to throw out capitalism. We tried that. Other countries tried that. It was called communism, and it just didn't work.
So let me make a proposal that will work, that has not only support from...
Then at another point, Michael Bloomberg also talking about, as he mentions there, the communism thing. That's a total red herring, and it doesn't make any sense to mention that. We're not talking about communism here. Bloomberg is right that a debate about forcing companies to give 20% of their ownership away is a non-starter right now. The communism comment is just dumb. One other moment that was sort of okay for Bloomberg, although it ended up falling flat, was bringing up this tired old thing about Bernie's three houses.
What a wonderful country we have. The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with three houses. What I miss here?
Well, you'll miss that I work in Washington, house one.
That's the first problem.
Live in Burlington, house two.
That's good.
And like thousands of other Vermonters, I do have a summer camp. Forgive me for that. Where is your home? Which tax haven do you have your home?
New York City, thank you very much, and I pay all my taxes.
So I don't know. I mean, maybe by some standard it was okay for Bloomberg, but it was really, really bad overall. The one thing that Bloomberg's presence did do was energize just about everybody on the stage. Even Joe Biden was fired up in the first part of the debate. Warren had higher energy. If Biden had had yesterday's level of energy throughout the debates, he might not have tanked his polling the way that it has. The other really weird dynamic was Mayor Pete versus Amy Klobuchar, getting into some very odd exchanges, including Pete hammering her about forgetting the president of Mexico's name, really going hard on that.
And I said that I made an error. I think having a president that maybe is humble and is able to admit that here and there maybe wouldn't be a bad thing.
Mayor Buttigieg,
if you could let me,
a good response.
If you could,
Yeah, look, I wouldn't liken this to trivial. I actually didn't know how many members were in the Knesset, so
well,
you got me there.
go.
But you're staking your candidacy on your Washington experience. You're on the committee that oversees border security. You're on the committee that does trade. You're literally in part of the committee that's overseeing these things, and we're not able to speak to literally the first thing about the politics of the country to ourselves.
Are you trying to say that I'm dumb, or are you mocking me here, Pete?
I'm saying that you shouldn't trivialize that
I made an
knowledge.
error. People sometimes forget names. I am the one that has, number one, has the experience based on passing over 100
Thank you,
bills.
Senator.
If I could respond, this was a pretty big
Quickly,
allegation. He's basically saying that I don't have the experience to be president of the United States. I have passed over 100 bills as the lead Democrat since being in the U.S. Senate. I am the one, not you, that has won statewide in congressional district after congressional district. And I will say, when you tried in Indiana, Pete, to run, what happened to you? You lost by over 20 points to someone who later lost to my friend Joe Donnelly. So don't tell me about experience. What unites us here is we want to win.
I genuinely don't know who that was good or bad for, because it was all so weird, and Pete just continuing to go after her on this issue.
Right.
And I think we should put a proven winner in charge of the ticket.
This is a race for
Mayor
president.
Buttigieg.
This is a race for president. If winning a race for Senate in Minnesota translated directly to becoming president, I would have grown up under the presidency of Walter Mondale. This is different. And the reason that I think we need to talk about Washington experience is that we should ask what that experience has led to. Experience is, and certainly tenure is not always the same thing as judgment. We're going to talk about votes in the Senate in Washington. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about a major policy.
Next question is
A lot of talking over each other there, and that was another unfortunate theme of the night. Candidates and moderators constantly talking over each other, many of the candidates being cut short in their answers. One of the moderators, Chuck Todd, almost constantly with a running soundtrack of yeah, and okay, over the candidates' answers. Extremely, extremely annoying. Bernie had a lot of good moments. For example, this one defending workers, again, in the face of Bloomberg, the target for the night.
Just to be
It is your policy.
Thank you. It is my policy, and I'm very proud of that policy. All right? What we need to do to deal with this grotesque level of income and wealth inequality is make sure that those people who are working, you know what, Mr. Bloomberg, it wasn't you who made all that money. Maybe your workers played some role in that as well. And it is important that those workers are able to share the benefits. Also, when we have so many people who go to work every day and they feel not good about their jobs, they feel like cogs in a machine. I want workers to be able to sit on corporate boards as well, so they can have some say over what happens to their lives.
Another strong Bernie moment, calling out Mayor Pete in sort of clearer, more direct terms this time about his billionaire or billionaire donors. Pete visibly sweating during this moment. When you see the close-up of Pete, he's sweating badly.
If speaking to the needs and the pain of a long-neglected working class is polarizing, I think you got the wrong word. What we are trying finally to do is to give a voice to people who, after 45 years of work, are not making a nickel more than they did 45 years ago. We are giving a voice to people who are saying we are sick and tired of billionaires like Mr. Bloomberg seeing huge expansions of their wealth while 500,000 people sleep out on the street tonight. And that's what we are saying, Pete, is maybe it's a time for the working class of this country to have a little bit of power in Washington rather than your billionaire campaign contributors.
All right, look.
Very, very strong Bernie throughout. I would probably say Bernie and Warren were the strongest last night, with Joe Biden close behind, just showing more energy than he has in recent times. Pete and Amy sort of going after each other on weird things. And then Bloomberg really the loser of the night. So if you say to me, who is in the net, who's the biggest winner last night, I actually believe it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump net benefited the most from last night's debate because Bloomberg completely self-destructed. And we'll see what this does to his campaign. The other candidates got shots in at Bloomberg, but otherwise, I don't believe the needle will be greatly moved for anybody else because we're so far into this thing and the only new presence on the stage was Michael Bloomberg. And overall, what will be portrayed as infighting by the right, even though it was making very clear the different types of choices that are available, I think in the net, Trump comes away with a slight benefit from last night's debate. It's just my opinion. You can disagree with me and we can all be reasonable, respectful people on that issue. Did a poll on my Twitter. About 4,000 of you voted. The question was, how does tonight's debate affect Bloomberg's polling? A plurality, nearly 40%, said Bloomberg loses 8 or more points as a result of last night's performance. I don't think it's actually that bad, but I do think Bloomberg loses a bit, maybe has to spend another 100 million to gain it back. I did not expect Bloomberg to get as annihilated as he did last night. And one other thought that I had about last night's debate. Last night's debate was by far the most entertaining debate of the primary. But we also probably heard the least about policy from the candidates, detailed policy. It was a lot of attacks on Bloomberg, Pete and Amy arguing about experience and how bad it is not to know the name of the president of Mexico. You had a lot of talking point attacks. That's probably in some way emblematic of our politics and media today. Sadly, the most entertaining to watch debate, whose ratings may have been very, very good, had the least substantive policy discussion of any recent debate I can remember. Certainly ideological differences and lines in the sand were drawn. But maybe in some way this is part of the problem that we're having in the discourse in the United States. I guess the major thing we learned of new information is Michael Bloomberg is not a good debater. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you expect to be the implications and repercussions to last night's debate. I'm on Twitter at @Pakman. We'll take a quick break and be back with much more.